Okay, so here are some examples of basically two short projects that I've come up with, just to kind of give you an idea of some of the things you can do. Now, really, there's absolutely no limit, and I was sort of in a electronic mood this past couple of days, so that's what you're getting. But I very often do things that are much more abstract and things like that. But this, I don't know, I was kind of in a mood for this. Anyway, all of these things are made with only the libraries that we've discussed. And again, the reason I want you guys to use those libraries is not because I think they're better than any libraries you might have, but it's because if you use a library that you have and I don't have, when you send me the project, I can't open it. And so I have to, guess what you might have been using. And it's just much better if we all are all kind of using the same tools. It makes feedback a lot easier and more useful. Okay, so what I have here is I took so let me mute this. I took a little, let me solo it. I took a little melodic idea that I came up with a little while ago while I was working on a project for a dance show. And what I ended up doing with it for them was completely different than this. It's much more kind of classical. But I thought it might be a kind of a fun place to start. So it's basically if you if you look at the MIDI information, it's just well, actually, why don't I just play it for you? It's basically just a pattern that repeats. It does change, so it repeats over two different chords, and so this is what it sounds like. Actually, let me start from the beginning. And in the original, it was played on a cello and a bass, but right now it's what I did is I used that same sound we used before called Rezo Brassy, and I think I changed a few things. I don't actually remember what I did. I think I added a filter, maybe. I don't know. Anyway, so that's what it sounds like now. Let me be quiet. Okay, and then there's kind of a counter or melody that goes along with like a harmonization, basically, that I put on the violin. Now, the violin that I use here is taken from the Ira player. So this is the violin that you have available. There's one thing I want to show you. So I really wanted to have a pizzicato sound, but the thing is, for that to happen, you have to choose the right violin. So I went to finale, default bang, and then I went to, of course, strings, if I can find them, solo strings, violin, and the one I used is the one called Violin Solo KS, which stands for Key Switches 1. So what does that mean? Instruments that have key switches are basically instruments that have multiple techniques or modes of attack, etc. It's almost as if you're getting more than one version. Well, it's actually, that's what it is. You're getting more than one version of the same instrument. For example, as you know, violins can play pizzicato, but if you're playing a note on your midi violin, how's the instrument going to know that you want pizzicato? Well, they use what they call key switches. So in this case, you can access those additional modes of techniques from here. Very often there'll be an actual key it's highlighted in each of those low keys. They're basically keys that are lower than the range of the instrument. And then when you hit one of those keys, that activates the switch to, in this case, it could be either sustain or pizzicato or tremolo, but some libraries have like dozens of techniques. I have one by UVI that has, I don't know, maybe 30, 40 different techniques like tremolo, sottoponticello, all of that kind of stuff. So I'm choosing pizzicato, so that's the sound. And the reason we didn't hear it, by the way, it's because it's I'm soloing this track, so we can't hear that. But if I solo that, we get that. Those are the pizzicato sounds, okay? Okay, so then let me play you these two together. So I'm going to solo these two. So let's start from here. And then the violin comes in. Anyway, so you get the point. What I thought it would be fun to do is to add a kind of a nice groove underneath, which again is not at all what I did before. Maybe if I could go back, I would have done it differently. I don't know. Anyway, so what I did next is I chose some percussion instruments, and I did that from the Contact Complete library. Let me open it. If it decides, okay, so there. So I did kind of what we've done before. I went to the one shots over here, and I chose a hi-hat that I liked, and you can choose your little keyboard too. Again, it's muted, so you can't hear it, but that's what I did. So I chose that sound, and then I did the same thing over here for the clap. I found a clap sound out of these in the same list. You could basically type here clap and you get all these different types. And then over here I have a kick. You know what? Let me actually unmute these so that you can actually hear them. Okay, so here we go. I guess they're not muted. All right, let me try one more time. So let's go here, and then okay, pull up the keyboard. And why don't you sound? What did I do? I'm muting something somehow. Oh, they're there. It's sounding. It doesn't matter. Anyway, but the sounds are there. So anyway, so I have a kick there. And then over here, this is the one that's a little bit more interesting. I have a sub. So I'm calling it a sub, but what it basically is, it's also a kick drum. And this is kind of a little bit of a strategy that people use, where you have your kick sound, and because it's very resonant, it basically is a pitch. So now it's not necessarily tuned properly. So you have to, yeah, you know what I was doing wrong is I don't know what I was doing wrong, actually. That's weird. Anyway, but you can still hear them from here. I don't know. I don't remember. So anyway, so I have this over here. Now what I had to do two things to get this to kind of my liking. One is that because I really wanted it to be pitched in a certain way, I had to retune it, because in the original it was 4 half steps off. So if I pressed the C, it was sounding like an E. And so I obviously wanted it to be in tune, like a low bass. So I just had to kind of figure out how far off it was. And then here there was an option. Let me actually zoom in a little bit, or open this window a little bit more. So there it is. So I was able to repitch it. And then I also changed the release time so that it was a little bit, the decay, so it kind of lasted a little bit longer, more like a plucky sound. So I had to do a little bit of work on this. And then the next thing I did is I actually added some distortion. And the reason for that is just to give it more of a grit. So this is what I use, a plugin that you have in your Reaper. It comes with Reaper. There are a whole host of plugins called JS plugins. And you can find them by just going to add it under. There's a whole JS category right here, and there's a ton of these. So you can, there's distortion, EQs. That they mostly look very, very simple, but that doesn't mean that they're not good. They're just very simple looking. I mean, they're basically, I think they're basically done in JavaScript, which is why they're called JS, I suppose. But you can actually, if you know how, you can go in and edit these. You can access the code. And so there's all kinds of people that do these, and they basically put them up for free. So that's kind of cool. So I messed around with that, and the end result was this kind of a sound right here, which had kind of a shake distortion to it. Now you see here it says left, so it sends it off to the left. Anyway, so I'll play you these individual. Oh, actually, before I do that, let me show you what I did. For example, with the hi-hat, and all of these things I wrote directly. Let me just make sure that I don't run out of battery. All of these things I wrote directly in just by hand, so just kind of double clicking in the notes that I wanted, just to come up with a rhythm that I was happy with. So for example, in this case, let me solo this. This is the rhythm of the and then here is the clapping sound. And of course, it doesn't make sense to hear it like this, but what I did is I first made the hi-hat to go together with this, so it's kind of filling in some space, and then I added a clapping to go along with that. Right? So again, they're not just created in isolation. And then after that, then I added my sub, and then a little later I have a kick drum, which goes like, oops, not solo, not mute, I mean. So it's not you. Sometimes kick drums are always on the downbeat. I did something a little bit different here, partly because I have such a strong downbeat with the sub. It didn't really matter. Anyway, so this is the end result. I'll just play. It's about a minute long, and let's see. Yep. Anyway, so they get the idea. By the way, that's already a minute of music. Often what people complain about when I give them creative projects, they say, oh my God, how am I going to come up with 2 minutes of music? I mean, it's not that hard, particularly if you I mean, basically this all started with 2 bars, and then there's a lot of looping, and then you use slight variations of things to keep it going. And of course, that's not the only way to go about it. You could have music that changes nonstop, of course. But anyway, this is I guess with DAWs, it's kind of easy to do this sort of thing. Right. So that's that project. Now let me show you a different one that's a little bit more elaborate. Let's see, what did I call it? My daughter was having fun with this. Do I need to save it? Yes, I guess. Okay, so this one looks a lot more complicated, but it's only maybe on the surface. Okay, so first of all, let me remove the mixer so I can actually see what's going on. So it's definitely busier. There's more things happening here. And this one combines more kinds of effects. So again, here, this whole thing started just with a little bass note that was just repeated over and over. By the way, all of these sounds, if I'm not mistaken, every single one of these sounds comes from Surge. If you go to, except for the harpsichord sound, the harpsichord comes from Garriton. So the bass sound, if you go to Surge, there's a whole list of percussion type sounds. Let's see, this is on their basses, but there's also percussive sounds, for example. There's basses, so you should explore this and see if for whatever reason all you were able to get to work with Surge, you can still do percussive stuff in here. There's all kinds of things. So that's basically what it is. It's an extremely simple. It's not even. I wouldn't even call it bass line. It's just a thumping bass notes that repeats over and over. It doesn't have any chords or anything. It's just the same. Well, not different chords. It's the same. Anyway, so this is what the bass note is. It's just this the whole time, nonstop. Okay, and then from here, I added a little snare sound, which I also found in Surge. And so that kind of went in along with that. Right, and then it kind of super simple. And then, okay, so where things get a little bit more interesting, and then I came up with this tune, which was right over here, which I basically just kind of improvised on the keyboard, and it goes something like this. Oh, that's all there is to that. And again, this is also a Surge instrument. And now what I did do there is I created 2 additional tracks that have pitch shifters, so that I have the same instrument comes out of all 3 of those. But so I basically routed it from here to here, as we've done before. So I have the synth clarinet going to the first pitch shift, and then here I loaded a pitch shifter that's a perfect 5th higher, and then another one here that's an octave higher, and I push sent one to the right, one to the left. Let me raise the volume of the 5th to see if you can hear a little bit better. You hear it? Right, so it gives it a little bit extra, a little bit of more substance. And then way later, I transposed it. What did I do there? Oh yeah. So what I did here is I did that trick that I showed you before, where I copied and pasted all the MIDI notes, and then I copied them. I made sure that my play bar was right at the very beginning. Then I pasted them, and then I transposed the copy up an octave. Okay. Again, these are, there's no particular reason for any of this. It's just kind of messing around with things. And then now where things get a little bit more interesting, let's see, where do I start? Let me talk about this first. So there's this cool instrument that I found, cool sound that I found in Surge that was doing all kinds of stuff just by, it had a, let's see, let me show you what it is. It's called, I don't even know how you pronounce this, Fiance loop. And it basically creates, because Surge has a sequencer that you can use. And so basically you can just, in some of these instruments, you press one note and it does a whole bunch of stuff. And that's kind of what I use as a starting point. So that's what that sounds like. So it does a whole layer funny thing. Actually, let me start it from here. Okay, but now so here's what I did. So I took that sound, and then I wanted the filter to change constantly. Okay, so if you look at the Surge instrument, let me go back to it. There is a cutoff filter, and what I wanted to do was to make the sound a little bit more interesting. I wanted to change constantly up and down. And so what I did is I added automation for that. And when you go to automation, when you have Surge open, you're going to be a million parameters. It looks really intimidating, but the only one that I needed was filter. And so you can actually type here what you want, and you kind of can break it down to what you're looking for. So it'll scale it down. And so the one that's active is called filter A cutoff, and that's basically this parameter over here, that right here. It's the filter A. That's filter A cutoff. And so then what I did is I didn't draw it actually. I created an automation item. And through that, I was able to, as I've showed you how to do this before, to use an LFO to basically create a shape that changes over time. And this is my MIDI, my automation item. And when I double click it, I get to see I chose a triangle wave. and I chose how many times I wanted to have it. And basically what it does is it goes up and down, and makes the filter sound. It gives it like a rhythm, basically. It's like, choop, choop. So that's why you get this like, so it's constantly changing. While the notes are changing, the filter goes up and down, up and down, up and down, up and down. Right? So that's what that is. It's pretty straightforward, actually. And then on this, and then I added a harpsichord sound, which I just found in my my Garriton. So this is also maybe a little bit interesting. I have a harpsichord sound, right? But the thing is, because I didn't want it to be so traditional harpsichord sound, I also added a distortion. It's one of the JS plugins. And then I EQ'd it to give it a little bit of shape. Okay, so I have my distortion. And then after that, I also have an EQ so that and I used something called a band pass filter that allows you to kind of choose a very specific tight narrow band. So it really no longer sounds like a harpsichord, basically. So this is what it is. Well, it does sound like a harpsichord a little bit, but it sounds definitely a little bit different also. It's like a harpsichord with distortion. And then what I did is I changed the EQ. So I created an automation for the EQ for the band. So the band that you saw earlier now shifts up and down, and using this shape. And while this is happening at a different rate, I have another automation item that this time controls the pan. So it also goes left and right. So that's why you heard it. So it changes timbre and it changes direction. So left and right, left and right. And again, I was just kind of playing around with these. Now, the great thing with automation is that with automation items, is that you can copy and paste them and things like that. Now, another thing that I did, which was fun, is not fun, but useful, is I created, once I had some ideas going, I created regions. And if you remember, you can select a segment and then do, let's see. No, I don't remember where the regions are. I always use a shortcut. Let's see if I select something. Okay, if I select this. Oh, here it is. I'm sorry, it was there. I just didn't see it. It was called region from time selection. Or maybe it wasn't there. I don't know. It doesn't matter. But the shortcut I usually use is Shift R. And so that allows you to create a region, and then regions, as we've seen before in a previous video, you could literally copy and paste and move around, and everything moves identically. So I did a lot of this sort of moving regions around. And then lastly, what I did over here, the reason you see these like moving things, is I drew these shapes. So I added some of these automation for resonance of the filter and the cutoff, and I just drew some shapes over here. You can also, by the way, if you have a MIDI keyboard, you can do this using the knobs of the keyboard. And the way that works is you can do, so let's say you want to change this parameter and you want it to change, but using the knob of your keyboard, then you can touch it. Basically, you just move it a little bit, and then you go where it says parameter, and you'll see that it says less touched is a filter balance. And then you say, go to learn. And then now all you do is you move your knob, and then Reaper will automatically detect what it is. And then you say, okay. And then from that point on, anytime you move your knob, it'll be moving that particular parameter. Now, this doesn't just work for Surge. It works for anything in Reaper, by the way. Any effect will have this button over here that says parameter. So if you want the delay time to change through your knobs, you could do that as well. Anyway, and then my daughter, while I was playing around with this, she heard it and she said, oh, you should do this tune over here. She came up with this tune that goes like this. So that's my daughter's contribution. Okay, so I'll play you this. This is about 2 minutes or something. Anyway, and so hope you find it at least entertaining. Anyway, so that's the idea. This could go on forever. I mean, you could repeat the whole thing, and now it's already like 2 minutes and a half. I could just copy and paste the whole thing again and just change a few things, bring in a new instrument. I don't know, change the key, change the chords, whatever. So it's kind of a fun way to go about doing things. And again, just let your inspiration take you places. I don't listen to any techno music or anything ever, but I got once I got these new contact libraries, I was like, oh, that's fun. So it's fun. It's a lot of fun. So don't worry about repeating things. I mean, if you're going to repeat a lot, try to change some things. So, I mean, there's a lot of repetition in this piece, obviously. But I don't know if it's hopefully it's clear that as things repeat, I try to maybe bring up the volume of one item. So if you don't just have it do the same thing over and over and then nothing ever changes, then it's not that interesting. But within the repetition, you can certainly have some structure and have some changes over time to kind of bring the attention to the listener to various things. Okay, well, anyway, this is it, and I'll see you next time.